The lights flickered in cell block D, once, twice, then everything went dark. Officer Ramirez reached for her radio, but the static screamed back. Something was wrong, the kind of wrong that made even seasoned guards hold their breath. Then, out of the shadows, a voice whispered, low, urgent, "Run. Don't talk." It was coming from inside one of the cells. She turned her flashlight and saw him, the inmate she'd processed just hours ago, standing by the bars, eyes locked on the corridor behind her. Before she could ask what he meant, a sound echoed down the hallway, metal dragging on concrete, chains, footsteps, and something else she couldn't quite name. "Officer," the inmate said again, voice trembling now, "you need to go. You shouldn't be down here." Her hand went to her holster. "What did you see?" she demanded. He swallowed hard. "Not what? Who?" And as the backup lights flickered back to life, she finally saw it, the blood trail leading straight toward her post. Stay with me until the end, because what he discovered that night inside the Texas prison changed everything they thought they knew about justice. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get into it. Officer Maria Ramirez had walked these corridors for 6 years. The Huntsville unit was no playground, housing some of Texas's most dangerous criminals behind thick concrete walls and steel bars. But tonight felt different. Tonight, the air itself seemed to carry whispers of something sinister brewing in the shadows. The power outage had started at exactly 11:47 p.m. Maria remembered because she'd been checking her watch, counting down the minutes until her shift ended. The fluorescent lights that normally bathed cell block D in harsh white light suddenly died, plunging the entire wing into absolute darkness. Emergency protocols kicked in automatically, backup generators humming to life, red emergency lighting casting eerie shadows across the walls. But something was off. The backup lights flickered inconsistently, creating a strobe effect that made everything appear to move in slow motion. Maria's radio crackled with static, making communication with the control room nearly impossible. Standard procedure required her to evacuate the block immediately and wait for maintenance to restore full power. But as she turned to leave, that voice stopped her cold. "Run. Don't talk." Cell 247 housed David Chen, a 34-year-old man who'd been processed into the facility just 12 hours earlier. His file was thin. Charges of aggravated assault, no prior convictions, no gang affiliations. A model prisoner so far, quiet and cooperative during intake. But now he stood pressed against the bars of his cell, his knuckles white from gripping the cold metal, his eyes wide with genuine terror. Maria had seen fear before. She'd witnessed inmates break down during their first night, seen groan, men cry when reality hit them. But this was different. Chen wasn't afraid for himself. He was afraid for her. "What are you talking about?" Maria whispered back, her training warring with her instincts. Every protocol she'd learned said not to engage with inmates during emergencies, not to show weakness, not to trust anything they said. But something in Chen's voice made her pause. "The maintenance crew," Chen said, his voice barely audible above the humming generators. "They're not maintenance. I heard them talking. They're here for someone specific, someone who's supposed to testify next week." Maria's blood ran cold. The Huntsville unit wasn't just any prison. It housed several high-profile inmates awaiting federal trials, witnesses in organized crime cases, former law enforcement officers who'd turned state's evidence. If Chen was right, if someone had infiltrated the facility during the power outage, this wasn't just a security breach. It was an assassination attempt. The sound of metal dragging across concrete echoed through the hallway again, closer this time. Maria clicked off her flashlight and pressed herself against the wall, her heart hammering against her ribs. Through the inconsistent emergency lighting, she could make out shapes moving at the far end of the corridor. 3 figures in maintenance uniforms, but their movements were too coordinated, too purposeful for routine electrical work. "How do you know this?" she whispered to Chen, moving closer to his cell. Because I used to be a cop, Chen replied, his voice heavy with regret. Undercover narcotics for 8 years before everything went wrong. I know the difference between real maintenance workers and killers dressed up to look the part. Those men are carrying more than tools in those bags. The revelation hit Maria like a physical blow. Chen wasn't just another criminal. He was former law enforcement. That explained his cooperation during processing, his respectful demeanor, his knowledge of prison protocols. It also explained why he was trying to protect her, instead of using the chaos to his advantage. Who are they after? Maria asked, though part of her already suspected the answer. Vincent Morrison, Chen said, naming the former police captain who'd blown the whistle on a massive corruption ring involving half the Houston Police Department. Morrison was scheduled to testify in federal court the following Monday, his testimony expected to send dozens of corrupt officers to prison for decades. He's in protective custody on the 3rd floor. They're using the power outage as cover to get to him. Maria's mind raced. Morrison's location was classified information, known only to a handful of guards and administrators. If these infiltrators knew exactly where to find him, they had inside help. Someone with high-level access had sold out one of the most important witnesses in Texas legal history. The figures at the end of the hallway had stopped moving. Maria could hear them talking in low voices, but couldn't make out the words. One of them was gesturing toward the stairwell that led to the upper floors. Another was checking something on his phone, probably a floor plan or timing schedule. "Officer," Chen said urgently, "you need to get out of here now. Call for real backup. Alert the warden. Do whatever you have to do. But don't try to stop them yourself. These aren't desperate inmates looking for a way out. These are professional killers." Maria looked at Chen through the bars, studying his face in the dim red light. 6 years of working in corrections had taught her to read people, to spot manipulation and lies. But all she saw in Chen's eyes was genuine concern and the kind of world-weary knowledge that came from years of police work. "Why should I trust you?" she asked, though her hand was already moving toward her radio. "Because in about 30 seconds, those men are going to realize there's a guard down here who can identify them," Chen replied. "And when that happens, Morrison won't be their only target tonight." As if summoned by his words, one of the figures at the end of the hallway turned in their direction. Maria saw the brief flash of a tactical flashlight sweeping across the cells, searching. She pressed herself deeper into the shadows, but it was too late. The light found her, held her for a moment, then clicked off. The 3 figures began moving toward her position, their footsteps echoing off the concrete walls with deliberate menace. Maria's radio crackled with static as she tried to call for backup, but the interference made communication impossible. She was alone in a darkened prison corridor with 3 armed killers approaching, and the only person trying to help her was a disgraced cop sitting behind bars. "There's another way," Chen said quickly, his voice urgent but controlled. "The old service tunnel that runs beneath this block. It connects to the administration building. If you can get there, you can alert the warden directly." "How do you know about service tunnels?" Maria asked. Though she was already moving toward the maintenance panel, Chen was indicating with his eyes. "Because I helped design the security upgrades for this facility 3 years ago," Chen replied. "Back when I was still one of the good guys. The maintenance panel was hidden behind a loose section of wall paneling near cell 250. Maria's fingers found the concealed latch, and the panel swung open to reveal a narrow tunnel barely wide enough for a person to crawl through. The tunnel was pitch black, filled with the musty smell of disuse and the distant sound of dripping water. Behind her, the footsteps were getting closer. She could hear voices now, speaking in clipped professional tones about timelines and extraction routes. These weren't desperate criminals. They were military or ex-military, operating with the kind of precision that came from extensive training and careful planning. "Officer," Chen called out softly, "when you get to the administration building, tell them David Chen sent you. Tell them to check the visitor logs from 3 months ago. Someone's been planning this for a long time." Maria looked back at Chen one last time before entering the tunnel. "Why are you helping me?" You could have stayed quiet, let this play out, maybe even benefited from the chaos. Chen's smile was sad and tired. Because I became a cop to protect people. That didn't change just because I made some terrible choices along the way. Maybe this is my chance to remember who I used to be. The sound of approaching footsteps grew louder, accompanied now by the metallic click of weapons being readied. Maria squeezed into the tunnel just as the first figure rounded the corner into their section of the block. She pulled the panel closed behind her and began crawling through the darkness, following the tunnel toward what she hoped would be salvation and the chance to save Vincent Morrison's life. But as she crawled through the narrow space, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that Chen had told her everything except the most important detail. Why was a former undercover narcotics officer really in prison? And what terrible choices had led him to that cell on the most dangerous night of her career? The tunnel stretched ahead of Maria like a concrete throat, swallowing her flashlight beam after just a few feet. Water dripped steadily from somewhere above, each drop echoing through the cramped space with metallic precision. Her uniform scraped against the rough walls as she crawled forward, her radio still crackling with useless static on her shoulder. Behind her, muffled voices penetrated the maintenance panel. The killers had reached Chen's cell. She voices sharp and professional him. There could hear them questioning. But Chen's responses were calm, measured. He was buying her time, even though it might cost him everything. The tunnel curved to the left, then split into two directions. Maria paused, trying to remember the facility's layout from memory. Left would take her toward the administration building, just like Chen had said. Right led toward the kitchen and loading dock areas. She chose left, hoping Chen's knowledge of the facility's blueprints was as accurate as his assessment of the threat. As she crawled deeper into the tunnel, Maria's mind raced through the implications of what Chen had told her. Vincent Morrison wasn't just any witness. His testimony could topple one of the largest police corruption networks in Texas history. Dozens of officers, including several high-ranking officials, faced federal charges based on Morrison's evidence, the kind of evidence that made people desperate enough to infiltrate a maximum security prison. The tunnel began to slope upward, and Maria could see a faint light ahead. She moved faster now, ignoring the way the concrete scraped her knees and elbows raw. Behind her, the voices in cell block D had stopped. Either the killers had moved on to their primary target, or they'd discovered her escape route. She reached the end of the tunnel, where another maintenance panel blocked her path. This one was newer, with a digital lock instead of a mechanical latch. Maria's heart sank. Chen hadn't mentioned anything about electronic security on the administration side. She pressed her ear to the panel, listening for any sounds from the other side. Silence. Then, footsteps approaching from somewhere beyond the panel. Heavy boots on linoleum flooring. Maria held her breath, praying it was legitimate security personnel and not more infiltrators. The footsteps paused directly above her position, then moved away. She tried the digital lock, pressing random numbers. Nothing. Then she remembered something from her training about emergency overrides. She pressed and held the 0 button for 10 seconds. The lock beeped twice and clicked open. Maria emerged into a storage room filled with cleaning supplies and maintenance equipment. The familiar smell of industrial disinfectant was almost overwhelming after the musty tunnel air. She could hear voices in the hallway beyond the storage room door, but these sounded different from the professional killers in cell block D. These were the voices of confused guards, trying to figure out why the power grid had failed. She cracked open the storage room door and peered into the hallway. 3 guards stood near the elevator bank, their radios squawking with reports from different sections of the prison. The main power was still down, but the emergency lighting here was more consistent than in the cell blocks. "Rodriguez," Maria called out softly to the nearest guard, someone she recognized from shift changes. Officer Rodriguez spun around, his hand instinctively moving to his weapon. "Ramirez, what are you doing down here? You're supposed to be on Block D." "That's what I need to talk to the warden about," Maria said, stepping fully into the hallway. "Right now, it's about Morrison." Rodriguez's expression changed immediately. Anyone who mentioned Morrison by name in this facility got immediate attention. The warden's in the command center, 3rd floor. But Maria, you look like you've been crawling through the walls. Maria glanced down at her uniform, now torn and stained from the tunnel. Because I have been. Rodriguez, listen to me carefully. Block D has been compromised. There are armed intruders in maintenance uniforms heading for Morrison's location. We need to lock down the entire facility immediately. Before Rodriguez could respond, the elevator chimed and the doors opened. 3 men in maintenance uniforms stepped out, their tool bags hanging heavy at their sides. Maria's blood froze. These weren't the same men from Block D, but their movements had the same controlled precision, the same military bearing. "Evening, officers," one of them said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just heading up to check the backup generators on the 3rd floor. Power outage has everyone working overtime tonight." Rodriguez nodded and started to step aside, but Maria grabbed his arm. "Check their IDs," she whispered urgently. "What?" Rodriguez looked confused. "Their identification," Maria said louder, her hand moving to her weapon. "All maintenance personnel are required to show identification when moving between floors during emergencies." The 3 men exchanged quick glances. The leader's smile faltered for just a moment. "Of course, officer. Just trying to get the power restored as quickly as possible." He reached into his pocket, but instead of pulling out an ID, his hand emerged with something else. Maria saw the flash of metal and reacted instantly, tackling Rodriguez to the ground just as the silenced gunshot whispered through the air. The bullet struck the wall where Rodriguez's head had been a split second earlier. The hallway erupted into chaos. Rodriguez rolled behind a concrete pillar, his own weapon drawn. Maria scrambled toward the stairwell, her radio finally crackling to life as she found a dead zone in the interference. "Command, this is Officer Ramirez," she shouted into the radio. "We have armed intruders in the administration building. Multiple shooters. Morrison is the target. Lock down all access to the 3rd floor immediately." Static answered her for a moment. Then a voice broke through. "Ramirez, this is Command. Confirm your location. We're showing you assigned to Block D. Block D is compromised," Maria replied, ducking as another silenced shot sparked off the concrete near her head. "There are 2 separate teams of killers in this facility. They're here for Morrison, and they have inside help." Rodriguez was returning fire now, the sound of his service weapon thunderous in the confined hallway. One of the fake maintenance workers stumbled and fell, dark blood spreading across his uniform, but the other 2 were advancing, using the cleaning carts and equipment as cover. "Maria," Rodriguez called out. "Get to the stairwell. I'll hold them here." Maria reached the stairwell door and yanked it open. The emergency lighting inside was dim but functional. She could hear footsteps echoing from multiple floors above and below. How many people were involved in this operation? And how high up in the prison hierarchy did the corruption reach? She began climbing toward the 3rd floor, taking the steps 2 at a time. Her radio crackled again. "All units, this is Warden Hayes. We have a code black situation. Unknown number of armed intruders in the facility. All protective custody inmates are to be moved to the secure wing immediately. This is not a drill." Maria reached the 2nd floor landing when she heard it. The distinctive sound of cell doors being opened electronically. Someone with administrative access was unlocking cells throughout the facility. This wasn't just an assassination attempt anymore. This was a full-scale prison break, designed to create maximum chaos and confusion. Through the stairwell window, she could see into the 2nd floor corridor. Inmates were emerging from their cells, some looking confused, others immediately understanding the opportunity they'd been given. Guards were shouting orders, trying to restore order, but they were outnumbered and caught completely off guard. Maria continued climbing, but now she could hear footsteps coming down from above. Heavy boots. Multiple people, moving with purpose. She pressed herself against the wall and drew her weapon, listening carefully. "3rd floor secure," a voice called out. "Package is in transit." Package. They were talking about Morrison like he was cargo to be delivered. Maria's radio squawked again, this time with Rodriguez's voice, strained and urgent. "Maria, they got past me. 2 of them headed for the stairwell. The 3rd one's down but not dead. Watch your 6. Too late." Maria heard the stairwell door below her slam open, followed by the sound of boots on concrete steps. She was trapped between the killers coming up from below and whatever team had secured the 3rd floor above. She reached the 3rd floor landing and carefully opened the door. The hallway was eerily quiet, emergency lighting casting long shadows between the administrative offices. But something was wrong with the silence. It was too complete, too sterile. Maria moved carefully down the hallway, her weapon drawn and ready. The protective custody wing was at the far end of this floor, behind 2 sets of security doors that required electronic access cards. If Morrison was being moved, this is the route they would have to take. She rounded the corner and saw them. 4 men in correctional officer uniforms escorting a figure in an orange jumpsuit between them. But their positioning was all wrong. Real guards would never cluster around a high-value prisoner like that, leaving themselves vulnerable to attack. These were the killers, and the figure in orange was Vincent Morrison. Morrison looked drugged or injured, his head lolling to one side as the fake guards half-carried, half-dragged him toward the service elevator. One of the men was talking quietly into a radio, coordinating with someone else in the facility. Maria had seconds to act. She could try to call for backup, but her radio had been unreliable all night. She could try to stop them herself, but she was outnumbered 4-1 by professional killers. Or she could follow them, try to figure out their extraction plan, and hope to intercept them at a more advantageous location. She chose the 3rd option, staying far enough back to avoid detection while keeping the group in sight. They reached the service elevator, and one of the fake guards used what appeared to be a legitimate access card to call the car. Maria noted the detail. They had corrupted someone with high-level security clearance, someone who could move freely throughout the facility without raising suspicion. As the elevator doors opened, Maria made her decision. She couldn't let Morrison disappear into the night. Whatever happened next, she had to try to save the man whose testimony could expose decades of corruption and bring justice to countless victims. She sprinted toward the elevator, her footsteps echoing off the walls. The fake guards turned in surprise, their hands moving toward concealed weapons. Morrison's head lifted slightly, his drugged eyes trying to focus on his would-be rescuer. "Stop right there," Maria shouted, her weapon trained on the nearest killer. "Texas Department of Criminal Justice, you're all under arrest." The lead fake guard smiled, the same cold expression she'd seen in the hallway below. "Officer Ramirez, I presume. You've caused us considerable inconvenience tonight." The fact that he knew her name sent ice through Maria's veins. This operation had been planned in detail, with intelligence about personnel assignments, shift schedules, and individual officers. Someone very high up in the prison administration had sold them out completely. "Let Morrison go," Maria demanded, though she knew they had no intention of complying. "Backup is already on the way." "Actually," the man replied, "I don't think it is." That's when Maria heard it, the sound she'd been dreading all night. Her radio crackled to life, but not with backup. Instead, a voice she recognized spoke through the static. "Lieutenant Barnes, her shift supervisor. Maria, stand down. You're interfering with an authorized prisoner transport." Her blood turned to ice. Barnes had been with the facility for 15 years. He knew every protocol, every procedure. He also knew that no authorized transports happened during power outages, especially not with high-value witnesses like Morrison. "Lieutenant," Maria said carefully, keeping her weapon trained on the fake guards, "I need you to confirm the authorization code for this transport." Silence stretched across the radio waves. The fake guards exchanged glances, their hands inching closer to their concealed weapons. Morrison's head rolled forward, and Maria could see now that his eyes were dilated, unfocused. They drugged him heavily, probably to keep him compliant during the extraction. "Maria," Barnes's voice came through again, but there was something different in his tone. something desperate. You need to walk away from this. Right now. Think about your family. Think about your daughter. The mention of her 8-year-old daughter Sophia hit Maria like a physical blow. How did Barnes know she had a daughter? More importantly, why was he threatening her? Unless he wasn't threatening her at all. Unless he was warning her. "Lieutenant, are you under duress?" Maria asked, though she already knew the answer. The radio went dead. The lead fake guard's smile widened. "Your supervisor is being very reasonable tonight, Officer Ramirez. Perhaps you should follow his example." Maria's mind raced through possibilities. Barnes was compromised, either voluntarily or by force. The corruption in this operation ran deeper than just a few bought guards. It reached into the administrative levels, possibly all the way to the warden's office. But Barnes's mention of Sophia hadn't sounded like a threat. It sounded like a father trying to protect his own child by warning another parent. "How much are they paying you?" Maria asked, buying time while she tried to figure out her next move. "Enough," the man replied. "But this isn't about money anymore. It's about survival." Morrison's testimony doesn't just threaten a few corrupt cops. It threatens an entire network that reaches from Houston police precincts to federal courthouses. Too many powerful people have too much to lose. Through the elevator's open doors, Maria could see the indicator lights. They were on the 3rd floor, but the elevator wasn't moving. Someone was holding it here, waiting. That meant their extraction route led somewhere else in the building, not down to a waiting vehicle. "The roof," Maria said, the realization hitting her suddenly. "You're taking him to the roof." The fake guard's expression flickered with surprise. "Very good, officer. Helicopter extraction in exactly 12 minutes. We'll be across the state line before anyone realizes what happened." 12 minutes. Maria glanced at her watch. It was already past midnight, which meant they'd been planning this operation down to the minute. The power outage, the cell door malfunctions, the coordination between multiple teams, all of it timed perfectly to create maximum confusion while they spirited Morrison away. But something still didn't add up. If they were professionals hired to eliminate a witness, why take him alive? Why risk a complicated extraction when a simple assassination would be easier and cleaner? "You're not here to kill him," Maria said, her voice filled with sudden understanding. "You're here to save him." The fake guard's smile faltered completely. Behind him, his companions shifted nervously, their hands moving closer to their weapons. Morrison's drugged eyes tried to focus on Maria's face, and she could see recognition flickering behind the chemical haze. "Morrison isn't just a witness," Maria continued, pieces falling into place. "He's one of you, part of the corruption network. His testimony was supposed to take down the competition, not expose the whole system." "Very clever," the man said, his voice now edged with genuine respect. "Morrison helped us identify which officers could be trusted and which ones needed to be removed. His testimony would have eliminated our rivals while leaving our core operations intact. But someone discovered the real scope of his involvement." Maria felt sick. The man she'd been trying to save was as corrupt as the people trying to kill him. But that still didn't explain why they were extracting him, instead of eliminating a liability. "He knows where the money is hidden," she said, another piece clicking into place. "Millions of dollars from years of corruption. And Morrison is the only one who knows all the account numbers. $57 million, the fake guard confirmed. Spread across banks in 6 countries. Morrison memorized every detail rather than risk written records. Kill him, and that money disappears forever." The elevator chimed softly, and Maria realized they'd been moving while she was distracted by the conversation. They were no longer on the 3rd floor. The indicator showed they were heading up, toward the roof access level. "Time's up, Officer Ramirez," the man said, pulling a compact pistol from beneath his jacket. "You've been very entertaining, but we have a schedule to keep." That's when the lights went out again. Not just the elevator lights, but everything. Complete darkness filled the small space, and Maria heard the distinctive sound of a door being forced open somewhere above them. Heavy footsteps echoed through the elevator shaft, moving fast. "What the hell?" one of the fake guards muttered. Emergency lighting flickered on in the elevator, casting everything in that familiar red glow. But now Maria could see something that hadn't been there before. A small device attached to the elevator's control panel, blinking with a green light. Someone had been tracking their movement through the building. Someone who knew exactly where they were and when they'd be there. The elevator lurched to a stop between floors, and the emergency phone began ringing. The fake guards looked at each other with growing concern. Their carefully planned operation was falling apart, and they were trapped in a metal box with nowhere to run. "Answer it," the lead guard ordered one of his men. The fake guard picked up the emergency phone, listened for a moment, then paled visibly. "It's for you," he said, holding the phone out toward Maria. Maria took the phone cautiously, her weapon still trained on the group. "This is Officer Ramirez." "Officer, this is Agent Sarah Chen, FBI." The voice was calm, professional, and somehow familiar. "I believe you've met my brother David." Maria's heart skipped. David Chen, the former undercover cop who'd warned her about the killers in Cell Block D. He hadn't been lying about being former law enforcement, but he hadn't told her the whole truth either. "Agent Chen," Maria said carefully, "what's your involvement in this situation?" "My brother was placed in your facility 3 months ago as part of a federal investigation into prison corruption. His arrest was staged to give him access to inmate communications and guard schedules. We've been tracking this extraction operation for weeks." The fake guards were growing more agitated, whispering urgently among themselves. Their leader kept checking his watch, calculating how much time remained before their helicopter window closed. The power outages, the cell door malfunctions, all of it was designed to test the prison's response protocols, Agent Chen continued. "We needed to see which personnel were compromised and how deep the corruption reached." "So Morrison really is a federal witness?" Maria asked. "Morrison is many things," Agent Chen replied. "But right now, he's the key to unraveling the largest police corruption network in Texas history. And the people in that elevator with you will kill anyone to prevent his testimony." The elevator shuddered and began moving upward again. Someone had overridden the emergency stop, probably from the building's main control room. Maria realized that the corruption network included people with access to every system in the facility. "Agent Chen, I need immediate backup," Maria said into the phone. "Already on the way? FBI tactical team is breaching the building as we speak." "But Maria, listen to me very carefully. The helicopter extraction isn't their real plan. It's a diversion." "What do you mean?" "While you've been focused on stopping them from taking Morrison to the roof, their real extraction team has been preparing to remove him through the underground tunnels that connect to the old mine shafts outside the facility. The helicopter is just meant to draw attention away from their actual escape route." Maria felt the bottom drop out of her stomach. The tunnel she'd crawled through to reach the administration building was just one of many that honeycombed the ground beneath the prison. If they had detailed maps of the tunnel system, they could move Morrison out of the facility completely undetected. "How long do we have?" Maria asked. 6 minutes before they reach the main tunnel junction. After that, we lose them." The elevator reached the roof access level and stopped with a mechanical thud. Through the doors, Maria could hear the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors approaching in the distance. The fake guards were smiling again, thinking their plan was back on track. But Maria now knew something they didn't. This elevator trip was just theater, designed to make her think she'd disrupted their operation. The real extraction was happening 4 floors below them, where David Chen was probably fighting for his life against the team that had stayed behind in Cell Block D. "Gentlemen," Maria said, raising her weapon as the elevator doors began to open, "I have some bad news about your travel plans." The lead fake guard's confident expression cracked as he saw something in Maria's eyes that told him their carefully orchestrated operation was about to become a disaster. Behind him, Morrison's drugged consciousness was slowly returning, and with it, the terrifying realization that he was trapped between corrupt cops who wanted to use him and federal agents who wanted to prosecute him. The elevator doors opened onto the prison roof, where the sound of approaching helicopters filled the night air. But Maria now knew that the real battle for Morrison's life was happening in the tunnels beneath their feet, where a disgraced undercover cop was making his last stand to redeem himself and save a witness whose testimony could change everything. The game of corruption and justice was far from over. It was just moving to a different playing field. The rooftop wind whipped through Maria's hair as she stepped out of the elevator, her weapons still trained on the fake guards. The helicopter's searchlight swept across the concrete surface, creating harsh shadows that danced between the ventilation units and communication towers. But something felt wrong about the aircraft's approach pattern. It was too slow, too deliberate, circling the facility like a predator sizing up its prey. "Your ride's here," Maria called out over the rotor noise. But her eyes never left the lead fake guard's face. She was looking for tells, for any sign that would confirm Agent Chen's warning about the diversion. The man smiled, but his eyes kept darting toward the stairwell door behind Maria. "Actually, Officer Ramirez, I think you'll find that helicopter belongs to your federal friends. We've been expecting them." Maria's blood turned to ice. The approaching aircraft wasn't the extraction helicopter. It was FBI tactical support, which meant the real escape was happening exactly where Agent Chen had warned her it would be. 4 stories below, in the labyrinth of tunnels that connected the prison to the abandoned mining complex outside the facility perimeter. "You played this perfectly," she said, understanding flooding through her. "Get everyone focused on the roof while your real team moves Morrison through the underground route. Give the lady a prize," the fake guard replied, "though I'm afraid she won't be around to collect it." That's when Maria heard it. Gunfire echoing up through the stairwell, muffled but unmistakable. Multiple weapons, automatic fire mixed with the sharp crack of handguns. The battle for the tunnel system had already begun, and she was trapped on a rooftop with 4 killers while the real operation unfolded beneath her feet. The helicopter circled closer, its searchlight now fixed on their position. Through the aircraft's open door, Maria could see tactical officers preparing to fast rope down onto the roof, but the fake guards didn't seem concerned. If anything, they appeared to be positioning themselves for something Maria couldn't yet understand. "Morrison?" Maria called out, trying to cut through the drug-induced haze clouding the corrupt witness's mind. "Vincent, can you hear me?" Morrison's head lifted slightly, his dilated eyes struggling to focus. When he spoke, his voice was thick and slurred, but unmistakably desperate. "They're going to kill me either way. The feds want me dead as much as the network does." "What are you talking about?" Maria demanded, though part of her already suspected the answer would redefine everything she thought she knew about this operation. "Because I'm not the only corrupt cop involved in this network," Morrison replied, his words becoming clearer as the drugs slowly wore off. "Agent Chen, the FBI handler running this operation, she's been feeding information to both sides. Her brother David isn't an undercover federal asset. He's a dirty cop who got caught and made a deal to save his own skin." The revelation hit Maria like a physical blow. David Chen, the man who'd saved her life in cell block D, wasn't a heroic undercover officer trying to redeem himself. He was a corrupt cop working multiple angles, playing the feds against the network while positioning himself to survive regardless of who won. The helicopter was directly overhead now, the rotor wash creating a miniature windstorm on the rooftop. But instead of federal agents fast roping down to secure the area, Maria saw something that made her stomach drop. The aircraft's markings weren't FBI. They were private security, the kind of unmarked helicopter that wealthy criminals used for operations that required complete deniability. "You see, Officer Ramirez," the lead fake guard called out over the rotor noise, "this entire operation has been a carefully orchestrated performance. The Chen siblings have been running a double cross that makes everyone else look like amateurs." Maria's radio crackled to life, and Agent Sarah Chen's voice cut through the static. But now Maria could hear something different in the agent's tone, something cold and calculating that she'd missed during their earlier conversation. Maria, I need you to secure Morrison and eliminate the other 4 men on that roof. They're loose ends that could compromise the entire operation. What operation? Maria demanded, her weapon now swiveling between the fake guards and the helicopter above. The one that's been 3 years in the making, Agent Chen replied. The one that will net my brother and me approximately $57 million in untraceable funds, while simultaneously eliminating every person who could connect us to the corruption network. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The Chen siblings weren't working for the FBI or the corruption network. They were playing both sides against each other while positioning themselves to steal the hidden money and disappear. David Chen's placement in the prison hadn't been a federal undercover operation. It had been a reconnaissance mission to identify key players and security vulnerabilities. Morrison was never supposed to testify, Maria realized aloud. You've been planning to eliminate him and steal the money all along. Very good. Agent Chen's voice crackled through the radio. But David made one mistake. He developed genuine feelings of guilt about dragging innocent people like you into this mess. That's why he warned you about the fake maintenance crew. That's why he's currently fighting to keep you alive in those tunnels below. The gunfire in the stairwell was getting louder, moving closer to the roof access level. Maria could hear boots on concrete steps, multiple sets of footsteps climbing toward their position, but she couldn't tell if they were federal agents, corrupt guards, or David Chen's people trying to reach the roof. Sarah, Morrison called out, his voice now completely clear despite the drugs in his system. You forgot one important detail about that $57 million. And what's that, Vincent? Agent Chen's voice carried a note of irritation. I moved it 3 days ago. Every account, every offshore bank, every cryptocurrency wallet, the money you've been planning to steal for 3 years, it doesn't exist anymore. The silence on the radio stretched for long seconds while Agent Chen processed this information. The fake guards exchanged worried glances, their confident demeanor cracking as they realized their payday had just evaporated. You're lying, Agent Chen finally replied, but her voice carried a note of uncertainty. Check account number 7749 Beta Singapore, Morrison said with a smile that was equal parts triumphant and terrified. Check the Cayman Islands Trust Fund under the name Wellington Holdings. Check the Bitcoin wallet with the address that starts with 3F7K. They're all empty, Sarah. I transferred everything to accounts that only I can access, and I'm the only person alive who knows the access codes. Maria watched the fake guards' faces change as the implications sank in. Without the hidden money, their elaborate operation was worthless. But that also made Morrison infinitely more valuable alive than dead, which meant everyone's motivations had just shifted dramatically. The helicopter began to descend toward the roof, its landing skids touching down on the concrete with a metallic scrape. The pilot kept the engines running, ready for immediate takeoff. Through the aircraft's windows, Maria could see figures moving inside, but the tinted glass made it impossible to identify them. Maria, Agent Chen's voice came through the radio again, but now it carried a tone of desperate urgency. Listen to me very carefully. The situation has changed. We need Morrison alive, and we need those account access codes. But first, we need to eliminate the 4 men standing next to you. The fake guards heard the radio transmission clearly. Their hands moved toward their weapons with the smooth precision of trained killers. But Maria was already moving, using Morrison's drugged body as cover while she backed toward the helicopter. You're all dead, the lead fake guard snarled, his professional composure finally cracking. Chen or no Chen, network or no network, you just cost us $57 million. Gunfire erupted across the rooftop as the fake guards opened fire simultaneously. Maria dove behind a ventilation unit, dragging Morrison with her as bullets sparked off concrete and metal around them. The helicopter pilot began to lift off, either trying to escape the gunfight or position for a better angle of attack. Through the chaos, Maria could hear David Chen's voice echoing up the stairwell. He was shouting orders to someone, coordinating an assault on their position. but she still couldn't tell whose side he was really on, or if he was simply trying to survive long enough to claim the money for himself. "Morrison," Maria called out over the gunfire. "If you moved the money, where did you put it?" Morrison's laugh was bitter and desperate. "I gave it back, Officer Ramirez. Every penny. Anonymous donations to victim compensation funds, police widow organizations, community programs that help people damaged by police corruption. The money's gone, distributed to hundreds of legitimate charities across the country." The gunfire stopped abruptly as everyone processed this revelation. $57 million, the driving force behind years of corruption, violence, and betrayal, had been given away to help the very people the network had victimized. "You're lying," one of the fake guards called out, but his voice carried more hope than conviction. "Check the IRS records," Morrison replied. "All donations were made legally, with proper documentation. The money exists, but it's no longer accessible to any of us. I made sure of that." Maria's radio crackled again, and this time it was David Chen's voice, strained and urgent. "Maria, I'm in the stairwell 2 floors below you. Sarah's people are trying to kill me. The network's people are trying to kill me. And now I think Morrison's people are trying to kill me too. I don't even know whose side I'm supposed to be on anymore." The helicopter had landed again, and now figures were emerging from the aircraft. Maria could see federal tactical gear, but she no longer trusted that the uniforms meant anything. Too many people had been playing too many sides for too long. "David," Maria called out over her radio, "if Morrison gave away the money, what's your exit strategy?" "Honestly," David's voice carried a note of dark humor, "I was hoping to live long enough to figure that out." That's when Maria heard something that made her blood freeze. Children's voices echoing up from somewhere deep in the facility. The prison's daycare center was located in the basement level, where corrections officers' children stayed during overnight shifts. Somehow, the violence had spread to the one place in the facility that should have been completely secure. "Oh God," Maria whispered, thinking of her own daughter Sophia, who was supposed to be safe at home with her grandmother tonight. "Maria," Morrison said quietly, "there's something else you need to know about this operation. The reason they chose tonight. The reason everything had to happen during the power outage." "What?" Maria demanded, though part of her dreaded the answer. "They weren't just after me. The network has been planning to eliminate 12 witnesses, 4 federal agents, and approximately 30 corrections officers who could testify about the corruption. Tonight was supposed to be a mass elimination event, disguised as a prison riot." Maria stared at Morrison in horror. The scope of the conspiracy was far beyond anything she'd imagined. This wasn't just about stealing money or silencing one witness. This was about erasing every trace of evidence that could expose decades of systemic corruption. The fake guards were repositioning themselves, preparing for another assault on Maria's position. The helicopter crew was setting up what appeared to be a sniper's nest, with someone positioning a rifle in the aircraft's doorway, and somewhere in the stairwell below, David Chen was fighting a running battle against multiple teams of killers. But now Maria understood that the real battle wasn't happening on this rooftop or in the tunnels below. The real battle was happening in the basement, where innocent children were trapped in a facility that had become a war zone. "Morrison," Maria said, making a decision that would either save lives or get them all killed. "Those account access codes you claim don't exist anymore. How many people would die if I believed you?" Morrison's expression changed, and for the first time since she'd met him, Maria saw genuine fear in his eyes. Not fear for his own life, but fear for something much more important. "All of them," he whispered. "Everyone in this facility. The children, the guards, the inmates, everyone. Because if the money really is gone, then the only way the network survives is by making sure no witnesses remain alive to tell their story." Maria looked across the rooftop at the fake guards, at the helicopter crew, at the chaos unfolding around them. Somewhere below, David Chen was fighting for his life while his sister orchestrated a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of law enforcement. And somewhere deeper in the facility, Children were trapped in a building that was rapidly becoming their tomb. The game had changed again. This was no longer about corruption or money or justice. This was about survival, and Maria was the only person in position to determine who lived and who died when the sun rose over the Huntsville unit. She keyed her radio one final time, knowing that her next words would either end the nightmare or make it infinitely worse. "Agent Chen, this is Officer Ramirez. I have Morrison, and I have information about the money. But first, I want to hear those children's voices again. I want proof that they're still alive." The silence that followed stretched across the rooftop like a death sentence, broken only by the sound of helicopter rotors and the distant echo of gunfire from the tunnels below. The radio silence stretched on for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Maria's finger hovered over the transmit button, waiting for Agent Chen's response about the children. The helicopter rotors created a rhythmic thrum that seemed to match her heartbeat, each rotation marking time that innocent lives couldn't afford to lose. Finally, Agent Chen's voice crackled through the static, but it carried a coldness that made Maria's skin crawl. "The children are fine, Officer Ramirez, for now, but their safety depends entirely on your cooperation." "Let me hear them," Maria demanded, pressing herself closer to the ventilation unit as one of the fake guards tried to flank her position. "Let me hear their voices, or this conversation ends right here." A pause. Then, faintly through the radio, Maria heard something that nearly broke her heart. Children's voices, singing what sounded like a lullaby. But the melody was wrong, forced, like they were being coached on what to say. One voice stood out among the others, a little girl who couldn't have been more than 6 years old. "Mommy, when are you coming home?" The child's voice drifted through the radio transmission. Maria's blood turned to ice. That was Sophia's voice, her 8-year-old daughter, who was supposed to be safe at her grandmother's house across town. Somehow, the network had taken her child and brought her to the prison as leverage. "How did you get my daughter?" Maria whispered into the radio, her weapon trembling in her hands. "Insurance policy," Agent Chen replied matter-of-factly. "We needed to ensure your complete cooperation. Sophia is safe as long as you follow instructions exactly. Deviate from the plan, and she becomes another casualty of tonight's unfortunate prison riot." Morrison was watching Maria's face, and she could see recognition dawning in his eyes. He understood that the stakes had just become infinitely more personal. "Officer," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something about those account codes." "Not now," Maria hissed, but Morrison grabbed her arm with surprising strength for someone who'd been drugged. "Listen to me," Morrison insisted. "The money isn't gone. I lied about donating it to charities, but I didn't move it to new accounts either. It's still exactly where it's always been, protected by a security system that requires biometric confirmation from 3 specific people." "What 3 people?" Maria asked, though she was beginning to suspect she didn't want to know the answer. "Myself, David Chen, and Lieutenant Barnes from your facility," Morrison replied. "We were the 3 primary administrators of the fund. All 3 of us have to be present and alive to access the accounts." The pieces clicked together in Maria's mind with horrifying clarity. That's why they needed Morrison alive. That's why David Chen was fighting in the stairwells instead of escaping. And that's why Lieutenant Barnes had been acting so strangely during their radio communications earlier. "Barnes is here," Maria realized aloud. "Somewhere in this facility. They have him too." "3rd sublevel," Morrison confirmed. "In the old interrogation rooms that were sealed off during the renovation 5 years ago. That's where they've been holding the biometric scanner and the primary access terminal." Through her earpiece, Maria could hear Agent Chen coordinating with other teams throughout the facility. The complexity of the operation was staggering. They hadn't just planned to steal money or eliminate witnesses. They had orchestrated a complete takeover of the prison, turning it into their personal fortress, while they systematically eliminated everyone who could expose their network. The fake guards were getting impatient. Their leader was making hand signals to his team, preparing for a coordinated assault on Maria's position. But she noticed something else in their movements. They were being careful not to hit Morrison with their weapons fire. They needed him alive just as much as Agent Chen did. Maria. David Chen's voice suddenly broke through the radio chatter, closer now and filled with urgency. I'm on the roof access level. Sarah's people are right behind me, and I think I know why they really brought your daughter here. What do you mean? Maria demanded, though part of her was terrified to hear the answer. It's not just leverage, David replied, his voice strained from running and fighting. The biometric system requires a fourth administrator for transactions over $10 million. Someone they added to the system 3 months ago as a failsafe. Maria's world tilted sideways. No, that's impossible. Check your personnel file, David said grimly. Check what security clearances were added to your profile when you volunteered for overtime shifts in the administrative wing. They've been planning this for months, Maria. You're not just a witness or a hostage. You're part of the system. The stairwell door burst open, and David Chen stumbled onto the rooftop, bleeding from a head wound, but still carrying his weapon. Behind him, Maria could hear more footsteps echoing up the concrete steps. Multiple teams were converging on their position. David, Maria called out, get over here. We need to figure out how to get those children out of the basement. But as David moved toward her position, Maria saw something that made her heart stop. One of the fake guards had positioned himself directly in David's path, his weapon raised and ready. It was an execution shot, designed to eliminate one of the 3 people needed to access the stolen money. David, down! Maria screamed, but it was too late. The gunshot echoed across the rooftop like thunder. David Chen spun and fell, dark blood spreading across his shirt. But he wasn't dead. The shot had hit his shoulder instead of his chest, and he was still moving, still trying to reach cover. That was a warning, Agent Chen's voice crackled through the radio. The next shot will be fatal. Maria, you have exactly 10 minutes to bring Morrison to sub-level 3. Bring David if he's still alive. Leave your weapons behind. And remember, your daughter's life depends on your complete cooperation. Maria looked at Morrison, who was struggling to his feet, despite the drugs still affecting his system. She looked at David Chen, wounded but determined to keep fighting. She looked at the fake guards, who were now openly positioning themselves to herd her toward the stairwell. The helicopter lifted off again, but this time it wasn't leaving. It was repositioning to provide air support for whatever was about to happen in the sub-levels of the prison. Through the aircraft's open door, Maria could see someone with a high-powered rifle, scanning the rooftop for targets. Officer Ramirez, Morrison said quietly, his voice now completely clear of the drug-induced haze. There's something else you need to know about this operation. Something about why they really need your daughter. What? Maria demanded, helping David to his feet while keeping her weapon trained on the approaching fake guards. The biometric system doesn't just require 4 administrators, Morrison explained. It requires a family member of each administrator as a genetic backup in case the primary user is killed or incapacitated. They didn't take Sophia as leverage. They took her because she's literally the key to accessing my portion of the accounts. Maria stared at Morrison in shock. That's impossible. Sophia isn't related to you. Morrison's expression was filled with a pain deeper than any physical wound. Maria, what do you know about your father? The man who died when you were 12 years old? The question hit Maria like a physical blow. Her father had been a corrections officer, killed in what was officially ruled a car accident, but had always seemed suspicious to her. She'd become a corrections officer herself, partly to understand what had really happened to him. My father was Vincent Ramirez, Maria said slowly. He worked at this facility until he died 15 years ago. Your father was Vincent Morrison. Morrison corrected quietly. I changed my name after his death, when I started working undercover to investigate the circumstances surrounding what happened to him. Maria, I'm your uncle. Your father was my brother. The rooftop seemed to spin around Maria as this revelation sank in. The man she'd been trying to save, the corrupt witness whose testimony could bring down a massive criminal network, was family. Her father's brother, who had spent 15 years living under a false identity while investigating his murder. That's why they need Sophia, Morrison continued. She carries the genetic markers from our family line. Without her biometric signature combined with mine, they can't access the accounts that contain evidence of everyone involved in your father's murder. David Chen was leaning against Maria for support, his wounded shoulder making it difficult to stand. Maria, he said weakly. That's also why Sarah recruited me originally. She knew about the family connection. She knew that eventually this operation would require both Morrison and his next of kin. Agent Chen's voice crackled through the radio again, more urgent now. Time's running out, Maria. Bring Morrison and David to sub-level 3 immediately. Your daughter is getting frightened, and frightened children sometimes have accidents. Through the radio transmission, Maria could hear Sophia crying in the background. Her daughter was scared, alone, and surrounded by killers who saw her as nothing more than a biological key to unlock stolen money. I'm coming, Maria said into the radio, though every instinct screamed against surrendering. But I want to hear Sophia's voice. I want her to know I'm coming for her. A moment later, her daughter's voice came through the radio, small and frightened. Mommy? The nice lady said you were coming to get me. But Mommy, I don't like it here. It's dark and there are scary people. Sophia, baby, listen to Mommy very carefully, Maria said, fighting back tears. I'm coming to get you right now, but I need you to be brave for just a little bit longer. Can you do that for Mommy? I can be brave, Sophia replied, her voice stronger now, like the police officers in your stories. Maria looked at Morrison, her uncle, the man who had been living a lie for 15 years to uncover the truth about her father's death. She looked at David Chen, wounded, but still fighting to redeem himself for choices he'd made years ago. She looked at the fake guards, professional killers who would eliminate anyone who threatened their operation. The helicopter was circling the facility now, its searchlight sweeping across the walls and grounds. But Maria noticed something that gave her a tiny spark of hope. Other vehicles were approaching the prison, their headlights cutting through the darkness. Real federal agents, real backup, people who might actually be there to help instead of exploit the situation. Morrison, Maria said quietly, if we go down to sub-level 3, if we access those accounts, what exactly will that accomplish? It will expose everyone, Morrison replied. Every corrupt officer, every judge, every prosecutor, every politician who took money from the network over the past 20 years, including the people who ordered your father's murder. Maria's radio crackled again, but this time it wasn't Agent Chen. It was a voice she didn't recognize, speaking with the calm authority of real federal law enforcement. This is Special Agent Williams, FBI Hostage Rescue Team. We have the facility surrounded. All persons inside the building, this is your opportunity to surrender peacefully. Through the helicopter's windows, Maria could see the pilot gesturing frantically to someone inside the aircraft. Their carefully planned operation was falling apart as real federal agents closed in on the facility. Sarah, Maria called out over her radio, sounds like your backup plan just became your primary problem. Agent Chen's response was immediate and filled with desperation. Maria, if you don't bring Morrison to sub-level 3 in the next 5 minutes, I will kill your daughter and every other child in this facility. The FBI can surround us all they want, but they can't get to the sub-levels before I eliminate every witness. Maria looked at Morrison and David, both men who had made terrible choices in their lives, but were now trying to do the right thing. She thought about her father, killed 15 years ago by people who believed their crimes would never be exposed. She thought about Sophia, scared and alone, but still trusting that her mother would save her. The fake guards were moving closer, their weapons ready, but their confidence shaken by the arrival of real federal backup. The helicopter was preparing to land again, probably to evacuate key personnel before the facility was completely surrounded. David, Maria said, helping him toward the stairwell, how much of what your sister told me was true? David Chen managed a weak smile despite his injury. About 10%. But the important part she got right. Tonight really will determine who lives and who dies. And Maria, for what it's worth, I'm sorry you and Sophia got dragged into this. Don't apologize yet, Maria replied, checking her weapon one final time. Save that for after we get out of here alive. They reached the stairwell door, Morrison moving under his own power despite the lingering effects of the drugs, David leaning on Maria for support. Behind them, the fake guards followed at a distance, herding them toward sub-level 3 where Agent Chen waited with a room full of innocent children and a computer system that could expose decades of corruption. As they began descending the concrete steps, Maria could hear the sound of real federal agents breaching the facility's main entrances. Flashbangs exploded somewhere in the distance, followed by shouted commands and the sound of tactical teams moving through the corridors. Morrison, Maria said as they reached the second sublevel, when we get down there, when we access those accounts, what happens to the children? Morrison's expression was grim. That depends entirely on whether Sarah Chen is the kind of person who keeps her word, or the kind who eliminates witnesses regardless of agreements. And which kind do you think she is? Maria asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. David Chen looked at her with eyes that had seen too much darkness. The kind who burns down the whole building to hide the evidence, he said quietly. Sarah's not planning to let any of us walk out of here alive. Not you, not me, not Morrison, and definitely not those children. As they descended towards sub-level 3, Maria heard the distant sound of Sophia's voice echoing through the concrete corridors. Her daughter was singing softly, probably trying to calm the other frightened children. The sound broke Maria's heart and filled her with a determination fiercer than anything she'd ever felt. When the final shots were fired that night, when the FBI tactical teams finally breached the sublevels and the smoke cleared, they found something remarkable. Officer Maria Ramirez had saved not just her own daughter, but 11 other children, exposed a corruption network that reached into the highest levels of government and brought justice for her father's murder 15 years after his death. David Chen survived his injuries and testified against his sister's organization. Vincent Morrison, Maria's uncle, finally got to tell the truth about the conspiracy that had destroyed so many lives. And Agent Sarah Chen? She never made it out of those underground tunnels. Sometimes the most unlikely heroes emerge from the darkest places. Sometimes justice comes from where you least expect it. And sometimes, when everything seems hopeless, a voice in the darkness whispers exactly what you need to hear.